I never expected my life to change during a routine physical. But then again, I guess the best moments always catch you off guard, don't they? I'm Reed, and this is the story of how a simple checkup turned into something I never saw coming. I'd been putting off going to the doctor for months. You know how it is when you're 26 and feel invincible. My insurance had finally kicked in at my new job, and my mum wouldn't stop texting me about scheduling an appointment. So one Tuesday morning in October, I finally caved and booked a slot at the clinic near my apartment in Portland. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I sat there scrolling through my phone, half reading an article about nothing important, when the door to the back offices opened. That's when I first saw him. Tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead. He wore navy blue scrubs and had this warm, genuine smile that made the fluorescent lighting seem less harsh. "Reed Thompson," he called out, looking down at his clipboard before his eyes found mine. I stood up, suddenly very aware of how I'd just thrown on jeans and a hoodie that morning. "That's me." "Great, I'm Luca. I'll be your nurse today. Follow me." His voice was calm, professional, but there was something kind in it that immediately put me at ease. We walked down the hallway, and I found myself noticing the way he moved, confident, but not cocky. He led me to a small examination room and gestured to the chair. "So, Reed, I see this is your first visit with us. Just a general checkup today?" "Yeah, nothing exciting. My mum basically forced me to come in." I laughed nervously and immediately regretted how that sounded. Way to seem like a child. But Luca just smiled, pulling up a stool. "Mums have a way of knowing best. Mine's the same way. All right, let's get your vitals first. Blood pressure, temperature, the usual." He wrapped the cuff around my arm, and I tried not to think about how close he was, or how I could smell his cologne, something clean and woodsy. "So what do you do, Reed?" he asked as the machine hummed to life. "I'm a graphic designer. Just started at a marketing firm downtown about 3 months ago." "Oh, nice. Creative work. That's cool." He watched the display, then unwrapped the cuff. "Blood pressure's perfect. Do you enjoy it?" I found myself wanting to give him more than just a polite answer. Honestly, it's good, but not quite what I imagined. I thought I'd be doing more innovative stuff, but mostly I'm just tweaking other people's ideas. Still, it pays the bills and my co-workers are decent. He nodded, taking notes. That's real life, right? The dream versus the reality. But hey, 3 months in, you've got time to figure it out. Something about the way he said it felt personal, like he understood that feeling of being slightly disappointed with where you'd landed. The rest of the exam was routine. He took my temperature, checked my heart rate, asked the standard questions about my medical history. But there was something different about the way he did it. He actually listened when I talked, made eye contact, laughed at my dumb jokes about hating needles when it came time for the blood draw. "You're doing great," he said, as he tied the tourniquet around my arm. "Just look away and take a deep breath." I turned my head, focusing on a poster about hand washing on the wall. I'm not usually this much of a baby about needles, I swear. "Hey, no judgment here. I've seen grown men pass out from this. You're handling it like a champ." His hand was steady and sure, and within seconds it was over. "All done. See? That wasn't so bad." When I looked back at him, he was smiling at me, and I felt something flutter in my chest that I immediately tried to dismiss. He was just being nice. That was his job. "The doctor will be in shortly," Luca said, labeling the vials of blood. "But everything looks good so far. You're healthy, which is always nice to tell someone." "Thanks. And thanks for, making this less awkward than it usually is." He paused at the door, and for just a second his professional demeanour shifted into something more genuine. "That's the goal. Take care, Reed." After he left, I sat there feeling oddly disappointed that the appointment was almost over. Which was ridiculous. I'd just met the guy. He was my nurse. This was a medical clinic. But I couldn't stop thinking about his smile, or the way he'd actually seemed interested in what I had to say. The doctor came in, an older woman named Dr. Patterson, who was efficient and kind. She went over everything, told me I was in good health, and sent me on my way with instructions to keep doing whatever I was doing. The whole appointment took maybe 40 minutes total, and as I checked out at the front desk, I found myself looking around, hoping to catch another glimpse of Luca. I didn't see him. I walked out to my car feeling strangely deflated, which was stupid. What had I expected? That he'd chase me down in the parking lot like some romantic movie? He probably didn't think twice about me. I was just another patient in a long line of appointments, But over the next few days I couldn't get him out of my head. I'd be working on a logo design and find myself remembering the way he'd leaned forward when I talked, genuinely interested. Or I'd be making coffee in the morning and think about his voice, warm and reassuring. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I'd spent maybe 20 minutes with the guy total. The thing is, I'd known I was gay since college. I'd even dated a couple of guys. Nothing serious, nothing that really went anywhere. I'd never been closeted exactly, but I wasn't super open about it either. My close friends knew, my family knew, but it wasn't something I advertised. And I'd definitely never felt this kind of instant connection with someone before. This pull that made me keep replaying our conversation over and over in my head. 2 weeks later, I was at a coffee shop near my apartment, working on some freelance stuff on my laptop. It was a Saturday morning, and the place was packed with the usual weekend crowd. I was deep into editing a poster design when I heard a familiar voice ordering at the counter. "Large Americano, please, with an extra shot." I looked up, and there he was. Luca, wearing jeans and a green flannel shirt, looking somehow even better than he had in scrubs. My heart actually sped up. For a second I debated just keeping my head down, pretending I hadn't seen him. But then he turned from the counter, coffee in hand, and our eyes met. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by a genuine smile. "Reed, right?" "Yeah, hi." I closed my laptop, suddenly nervous. "Luca." "Good memory." He walked over to my table and I noticed he seemed slightly uncertain, like he was deciding something. "How've you been? Everything still checking out okay health-wise?" "All good. Clean bill of health, just like you promised." I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Do you want to sit? I mean, if you're not meeting someone or whatever." "No, I'm solo today. Yeah, sure, thanks." He settled into the chair, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "This is my Saturday morning ritual. Good coffee, a book, a couple hours away from the hospital." "Hospital? I thought you worked at the clinic." "I do, but I also pick up shifts at Providence a couple times a month. Keeps things interesting, and honestly, the extra money helps with student loans." He took a sip of his coffee. "What about you? Working on a Saturday?" "Freelance project. Trying to build up a portfolio so maybe I can eventually go out on my own." I surprised myself with how honest I was being. "The 9 to 5 thing is fine, but I keep thinking there's got to be more, you know?" "I do know." He leaned back in his chair and I noticed the way the morning light caught his features, the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth in his brown eyes. "That's actually why I'm in nursing. I was pre-med for 2 years, following the path my parents wanted, and I was miserable. Switching to nursing was the best decision I ever made. More patient interaction, less bureaucracy, and I actually enjoy going to work most days." We talked for over an hour. The conversation flowed so naturally, jumping from work to families, to the best pizza places in Portland, to our shared love of hiking, even though neither of us had been in months. I learned that he was 28, that he'd moved here from Sacramento 3 years ago for a fresh start after a bad breakup, that he had a dog named Pepper, who was apparently the love of his life. "I should probably get going," he finally said, though he didn't move to stand up. "I promised myself I'd actually go grocery shopping today instead of living off takeout another week." "Yeah, I should get back to this design." I gestured at my laptop, even though the last thing I wanted was for him to leave. He stood up, grabbed his empty coffee cup, then hesitated. "Hey, this might be weird, and tell me if it's crossing a line, but would you want to grab a beer sometime? There's a brewery near here that's supposed to be good. I mean, as friends, not like a weird nurse-patient thing." My pulse jumped. "Yeah, definitely. That sounds great." We exchanged numbers right there in the coffee shop, and as I watched him leave, I felt like something significant had just happened, even though I couldn't quite name what it was. I sat there for another 10 minutes staring at his contact info in my phone before I finally texted him. "Hey, it's Reed. This week sometime for that beer?" His response came 3 minutes later. "Wednesday work? 7 o'clock?" We met at the brewery on Wednesday, and it felt different from the coffee shop, more intentional. We got a table in the corner, ordered a flight of IPAs to share, and fell into conversation even easier than before. He told me about a difficult patient he'd had that day, someone who'd been scared about a diagnosis, and how he'd stayed late just to make sure they felt heard and supported. I found myself admiring not just how he looked, but who he was, the kind of person who genuinely cared. "Can I ask you something?" I said, halfway through our second round. The beer had made me brave. That thing you said at the coffee shop about moving here for a fresh start, what happened? He was quiet for a moment, running his finger around the rim of his glass. I was with someone for 4 years. We were talking about marriage, the whole thing. And then I found out he'd been cheating on me for most of the last year. It wasn't even that he cheated that destroyed me. It was realizing I'd been so blind to it. Made me question my own judgment, you know? That's brutal, I'm sorry. It was 3 years ago, and honestly I'm over it now. But at the time I needed to get away from everything that reminded me of him. Portland was random, but it's been good to me. He looked at me directly. What about you? I feel like I've been doing all the talking about my disaster of a love life. I laughed, feeling nervous. No disasters here, mostly because there hasn't been much of a love life to speak of. I dated a guy my senior year of college, another guy for a few months last year, but nothing serious. I think I'm pretty good at keeping people at arm's length, if I'm being honest. Why do you think that is? The question was gentle, curious, not pushy. I don't know. Fear, maybe. Of getting hurt. Of it not working out. Of having to actually be vulnerable with someone. It's easier to just keep things surface level. Yeah, I get that. He smiled at me, and there was understanding in it. But also kind of lonely, right? Yeah, I admitted. Really lonely sometimes. Something shifted between us in that moment. The air felt different, charged with possibility. We stayed at the brewery until they closed, talking about everything and nothing, and when we finally walked out into the cool Portland night, I didn't want it to end. I had a really good time tonight, Luca said as we stood by our cars. Me too, we should do this again. Definitely. He pulled out his keys, then looked at me. Reed, I'm just going to say this because I'm terrible at playing it cool. I think you're really interesting and I'd like to keep getting to know you, as more than just friends if you're open to that. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I'd like that too. A lot, actually. He grinned, and it was like the sun coming out. Okay, good. That's really good. He stepped closer, and for a second I thought he might kiss me, but instead he just squeezed my arm gently. Text me when you get home safe. Yeah, I will. I drove home feeling like I was floating, and I did text him, and we texted until 2 a.m. about nothing important. That became our pattern. We'd see each other once or twice a week, always finding excuses to extend the evening, to have one more drink, to walk around the neighbourhood just to keep talking. And we texted constantly, good morning messages and random thoughts throughout the day, and good night texts that got later and later. 3 weeks after that first brewery date, he invited me to his apartment to meet Pepper. The dog was a small terrier mix with wiry fur and an abundance of energy, and she immediately decided I was her new best friend. She likes you, Luca said, laughing as Pepper jumped into my lap on the couch. She's usually suspicious of new people. I'm honoured. I scratched behind her ears, and she made a happy snuffling sound. She's perfect. She's a menace, but yeah, I love her. He sat down next to me, close enough that our knees touched. We'd been dancing around physical contact for weeks now, small touches here and there, nothing that crossed into clearly romantic territory. But the tension was building, this awareness of each other that made every interaction feel electric. We ordered Thai food and watched a movie, some action thing that neither of us paid much attention to. I was too aware of him next to me, the warmth of his body, the way he'd glance over at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Pepper eventually curled up between us and fell asleep, and Luca laughed. She's cock-blocking me, he said, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, that was presumptuous. Was it? I looked at him, feeling brave. Presumptuous. I don't know. I keep trying to figure out what this is between us if I'm reading it right. His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. I carefully moved Pepper to the other side of the couch, then shifted closer to him. You're reading it right. Yeah? He reached out, his hand finding mine, fingers interlacing. Yeah. My voice came out barely above a whisper. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, but I didn't want to. When his lips met mine, it felt like everything clicked into place. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, and then deeper, as we both gave in to what we'd been building toward for weeks. His hand came up to cup my face, and I felt like every nerve in my body was on fire in the best way possible. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. I've wanted to do that since the coffee shop, he admitted. I've wanted you to do that since the clinic. I laughed, feeling giddy and nervous and more alive than I had in years. Is that weird? That I was attracted to you while you were taking my blood pressure? Maybe a little, but I'll take it. He kissed me again, softer this time. For the record, I thought you were cute too. I tried really hard to stay professional. We spent the rest of the night on his couch, kissing and talking and just being close. Nothing more than that, but it felt significant, like we were building something real and worth taking our time with. When I finally left around midnight, I felt different, like I'd crossed some threshold into a version of my life I'd been too scared to reach for before. The next few months were probably the happiest I'd ever been. We fell into a relationship that felt easy and right. Luca would come over after his shifts, exhausted but always willing to hear about my day. I'd meet him for lunch when I could get away from the office. We went hiking on weekends, took Pepper to the dog park, cooked dinner together in his tiny kitchen. He met my friends, I met his. We just fit. I found myself opening up to him in ways I never had with anyone else. I told him about my fears of not being good enough, of never quite measuring up to what I thought I should be. He listened without judgment, shared his own insecurities about whether he was making a real difference in his work, about whether he'd ever fully trust someone again after what his ex had done. "I trust you," he told me one night as we lay in his bed, my head on his chest. "That scares me sometimes, how much I trust you. But it's a good scared, if that makes sense." It makes perfect sense. I tilted my head up to look at him. "I'm falling in love with you. I think I have been since that first appointment." His eyes got bright and he pulled me closer. "I'm already there, Reed. I love you. I really love you." Hearing those words, saying them back, it felt like coming home. We stayed up half the night talking about the future, about what we wanted, about the possibility of moving in together eventually, of building a life that was ours. It wasn't just romantic fantasy talk, it was real, grounded in who we actually were and what we actually wanted. 6 months after that first checkup, I moved into his apartment. It was a little cramped with both our stuff, but we made it work. We hung my artwork on his walls, rearranged the furniture a dozen times, argued good-naturedly about whether we really needed his lumpy old armchair. Pepper adjusted to having me around full-time, and I adjusted to the chaos of living with a nurse who worked irregular hours. But it felt right in a way nothing else ever had. My mum called one Sunday afternoon while we were making breakfast together. Luca was at the stove making pancakes, and I was sitting at the counter drinking coffee. "How's everything going, honey?" she asked. "Really good, Mom, really, really good." "You sound happy. Happier than I've heard you in a long time." I looked at Luca, who was singing off-key to some song on the radio, spatula in hand, and felt overwhelming gratitude for whatever twist of fate had made me schedule that appointment. "I am happy. I actually have someone I want you to meet. His name is Luca." There was a pause, then her voice came back warm and excited. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the checkup, about the coffee shop, about falling in love with someone who made me want to be braver and more open. And when I hung up, Luca came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "So I'm meeting your mum? If that's okay, she's already planning the visit." "More than okay." He kissed my temple. "I love you, Reed, even if you did fall for me in the most unromantic setting possible." I turned in his arms to face him. "I don't know. I think it's pretty romantic. I went in for a checkup and left with the love of my life. That's a pretty good story." He smiled, that same warm smile that had caught my attention that first day. "Yeah, it really is." And it was. It is. Because sometimes the best love stories start in the most unexpected places, with a routine appointment and a nurse who made you feel seen. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to show up, to stay open, to let yourself fall even when it's scary. I'm grateful every day that I did, that I listened to my mom and scheduled that checkup, that I walked into that clinic and met someone who changed everything. Love found me when I wasn't even looking for it, and that's made it all the more precious.